Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and I thought what we do in this one is just a reminder, I was reminded of some of these recently myself, of 5 things, if you like, that investors do which they can't help doing, but they shouldn't. Now, that's not exactly the title of the video, but you get the idea. So what do I mean? Humans are emotional, all right? And we are designed to survive, okay? In other words, basically, when we lived on the Savannah, okay, we had to escape from wild animals, we had to survive. We are programmed to do certain things in certain circumstances, which made perfect sense when survival was a lot more difficult, but in investing terms are not always helpful. And there are 5 I want to cover today. They're called psychological biases, or ways your brain can trick you. It's not your brain's fault. It's programmed to do this, but you need to be aware of them because in an investing context, they can be a little unhelpful. And they are the instinct to do fight or flight, the adrenaline rush as I call it, our aversion to losses, more coming up in a moment, our preference for jam today, and these all made a degree of sense, as I say, when we were fighting for survival out on the Savannah, fear of missing out, and our tendency towards survivorship bias, as it's called. So 5 things. So let's go through those. Fight or flight. All right. This is the adrenaline surge that you feel when you're threatened or really excited about something. In investing, you can understand it. I mean, basically, fight or flight was, do I take on this lion or do I leg it? And it's a split it's an instantaneous calculation. You can't sit there as pondering as you get eaten. All right. So it makes perfect sense on the plane, if you like. But these days, when you're an investor, does it make sense? And the answer is it doesn't really, because that adrenaline rush when something happens, all right, and that something could be in the news, it could be something you see on your screen, that instinct to do something can lead us to what's called irrational exuberance. All right, it can lead us to make mistakes. We get overexcited, we panic. All right, something goes wrong in the markets, poof, sell everything. And that, as I've mentioned in other videos, can be a mistake. So how do you get around this natural instinct, which has its place in modern society? I'm not saying we need to dehumanize ourselves. You know, those adrenaline rushes are useful. They heighten our performance in certain circumstances. Well, the solutions, I'm afraid, in investing terms, you need to be dull, analytical, and systematic. There are ways of doing that. You can automate investing, for example. You can hand over to somebody who is dull, analytical, and systematic. All right, there are ways around it, or you can recognize it in yourself and counter it. You know, so don't panic sell. All right, don't rush in to the latest idea just because it's all over the news. All right, take your time, sit back, think about it. Easy to say, harder to do. Number 2, loss aversion. Now, this is an established psychological bias. This isn't me just making stuff up. Humans are programmed to fear losses more than gains. And that's because, yes, if you're out on the plane, bagging your next meal gives you a feeling of satisfaction, but being eaten by your next meal will give you remorse, all right? So it's understandable that ultimately we need to survive. And that means we are loss averse. All right, and I'm shortcutting loads and loads of studies here, but let me just explain mathematically why that's true for investors. If you think about it, if you've got £100 and you lose half of it, so you've only got £50, you've now got to double it to get back to where you were. Whereas if you've got £100 and you make 50%, you're now up to £150, but a loss takes you only down to £100. So you've made 50%, okay, whereas if you drop 50%, you've got to make 100% to recover your losses. So mathematically, losses are quite painful, all right, and that's part of the reason why investors can be paranoid about losing money. And it's the right thing. You know, Warren Buffett once said, rule number 1 of investing is don't lose money. But if you are too paranoid, it can lead to certain things, what I call the once bitten, twice shy mentality. So there are people who lose money, quite a lot of money potentially, because they invest just before a big market dip, and they never go back to shares ever again. All right, and they limit themselves to cash investing or whatever it is they're doing, and over the long term, that can be catastrophic in inflation terms. Or it gives you the wrong risk tolerance. You know, when you're young, you should be taking a decent amount of risk. Not crazy, but you know, you've got a chance to make some decent returns. But if you are always loss averse, always worrying about whether you're going to lose a little bit of money. What if the market drops 20% tomorrow, which it could, not saying it will, then you can end up with the wrong long-term risk attitude. And you can reach, bad conclusions. In other words, you can sort of sit out of the market for too long. You can be fearful when you should be being greedy, as the old cliche goes, as a contrarian investor and so on. So what's the solution? Really, knowledge is power. Understand market cycles. Understand that markets do go up and down, that volatility is the price you pay for long-term returns, and accept that and build a strategy around it. And in other videos, I've talked about that and about the importance of understanding how markets behave so you can calibrate your behavior accordingly. Number 3, jam today. We all do this. There's a famous marshmallow test where you basically say to a child, would you like 2 marshmallows now so you can wolf them, or are you prepared to defer that gratitude, as it's called? I won't go through the marshmallow test, but it's a famous one. And kids that are able to basically postpone current gratification, not scoff everything on the table, are shown to be better in the long term, according to that study. But we all do it. It's that let's prioritize today and worry about tomorrow. But it can lead to regret, all right? Because tomorrow eventually arrives, even if tomorrow is 10 years away, and then you think, oh, I wish I'd started saving earlier. I wish I hadn't done that 10 years ago. So it's human nature, to preserve yourself now, because if you don't, there'll be no tomorrow. So it is logical. You're not being eaten now, if you like, is important. But as an investor, you have the luxury of being able to take a long-term view. All right, you're probably not going to get eaten by anything tomorrow. So you need to visualize, here's a quite powerful tool, what you might be thinking about what you do now in 10 or 20 years' time. Someone once said, when an employer takes you on as somebody like me who's had a bit of experience, they're not buying the Tim Bennett right in front of them, they're buying 20 years of experience, all right, accumulated over time. Same in investing. Will you look back and kick yourself in 10 or 20 years' time? And if the answer is, actually, I might, am I doing the right things now? Will I shake myself by the hand? Sounds a bit weird what I'm saying, but it's an important skill. Okay, next one, crowd following. We all do it. Been to a football match, a pop gig. We love to follow crowds. All right, that many people can't be wrong about Taylor Swift, for argument's sake. I'd debate that one, but you get my drift. We follow crowds. It gives us a sense of security. We feel like we belong. Now, this is augmented by social media. Constant fear of missing out on tickets, on holidays, on something happening down the pub around the corner. The solution is not, turn off social media. I mean, I know that's what we tell kids to do, but that's unrealistic. It's with us. It's out there. The solution is not to never go to a concert or a football match. Clearly it's not, but it is to be yourself. When it comes to investing, all right, you need to be disciplined. You need to set your own goals, and the strategy that will hit them will be personal to you, and it might be totally different to the person sitting next to you or your next door neighbor. That's the key to it. Not to be unduly influenced by what you're seeing on screens, on the telly each night, and actually be quite disciplined about the approach you take. Then there's finally survivorship bias. Now, there are loads of examples of this if you're wondering what it is. What it is somebody saying, isn't it marvelous? There's a 90-year-old playing tennis down the road. I can't wait until I'm that 90-year-old. You might be. It's people saying, look how these funds have performed over the last 10 years, forgetting that a lot of the ones that started didn't finish. If you see what I mean, you are looking at the survivors. You have to be careful. It's like the person on the tennis court. We'd all love to be that 90-year-old who's still fit, but some of us won't be. Or it's, the Dragon's Den moment, or The Apprentice. You see someone get the money that they want. You see someone win, right? And The Apprentice is a good example. You can actually see the dropout process as you watch it, all right? 18 other people have gone back in taxis somewhere. So if you turn it on the last program, you'll just see the winner and go, I want to be that. And you won't see the process they've been through, and you won't have lived next to the people who didn't make it. So this is the point. The human brain is wired. It's called survivorship bias. We focus on winners, all right? And it tends to be the winners you see on social media. I mean, no one wants the story of a loser, they should actually, but they don't. They want to see the winners. And the problem with this is that it can mislead you when it comes to investing. You can get a distorted view of how easy it is to make money, or you can get a distorted view of which funds and which shares you should be buying based purely on the sort of publicity blast that accompanies them. So what's the solution? It's quite a difficult one, this, but try to be data, not story driven. Stories are important. They make sense of the world, but try and back them with hard facts. And that might mean you have to do some digging. Yeah, I'm not saying don't back survivors. Yeah, I mean, what? Because that would be a very pessimistic view of the world. But do some homework first. Okay, so there we have it. 5 ways our brains play tricks on us, quite legitimately, but something to be aware of as an investor. I've done other videos on this area, by the way, so that would be killick.com/learn. There's a little bit of that kind of stuff in my How to Invest in Equities guide, because there are direct reasons, mistakes we make that are based on some of the things I've talked about. And sometimes you get the odd article in Confidant, our quarterly magazine, editor at killick.com, on this very topic.